Good morning, and welcome to the Closers Inner Circle podcast with your host, Ben Gay III and Denise Griffitts. And this episode of the Closers Inner Circle podcast is sponsored by The Closers, also known as the Sales Bibles by Ben Gay III. Now, these vital resources are crafted to enhance your sales skills and transform your business approach no matter where you are. If you're just starting or you're an experienced professional, you need these books. They offer essential insights and strategies to help you reach your goals. And Ben has been doing this work for a long time. He knows what he's talking about. In fact, these books are known as the sales Bibles across the world. And in just a few minutes, I will get Ben to share with you how to order those books with free shipping. And our topic today, this is part 3, and then we'll move on to something else. But our topic today is mastering sales objections. First, before we get to that, we're going to finish up our 3-part discussion about the legendary Ross Perot, who was not just a successful businessman, but he was a trailblazer in the world of sales and entrepreneurship. And Ross Perot attributed his success to several key traits, very strong traits, and principles that he consistently applied throughout his life and his career. And we've discussed those throughout the last 2 conversations. We'll finish it up today. So open up your book to page 100 to follow along. And then we're going to move to page 53, which features a chapter titled When You're Hit by a 2x4, which I love. And Ben's training approach emphasizes preparation, practice, and strategic setup. And we're going to talk about that. So basically, this methodology that he's going to be sharing with us is grounded in the understanding that much of selling is predictable. And I know people don't think that. They're like, oh, geez, what's going to happen next? It's predictable. And Ben is going to explore his 6 steps, which include his 5-step solutions and then a 6-step that serves as an emergency escape hatch. And God, we all need one. So anyway, you're going to learn over this conversation, and probably 1 or 2 more, how to effectively handle 90% of unexpected objections, provided, and write this down, provided you are selling a worthwhile product or service at a reasonable price to a qualified prospect. Good morning, Ben. It's Wednesday. Good afternoon, Ben. It's Wednesday, and it's always the highlight of my week to chat with you. And by the way, happy birthday to you.
Thank you very much. I'm not a birthday person really, but I'll have to admit I've got a bunch of birthday messages brought on, I know, by Facebook reminders and so on. But nevertheless, it was sort of fun, and it's dying. And am trying to answer every one of them. So if you're late this year, make a note, ladies and gentlemen. August 22nd. Is my birthday, and I'd love to hear from you next year. And I'm one of the few people, I think I've told you this, Denise, who knows the date of his conception, December 7th, 1941. My father was home from the Navy on leave. The Japanese hit Pearl Harbor. He received word to report back to base. But before leaving, he and my mother had one last interlude, I guess you would call it, under the
It was a
theory.
goodbye. It was a goodbye kiss.
Yeah, under the theory they might not see each other again or whatever.
Right.
And so I actually know my conception date, if that's the right word. And my father always said 2 horrible things befell the United States on December 7th, 1941. The Japanese struck Pearl Harbor, and I was conceived. So I'm not sure they equal each other in severity, but that was his opinion.
Parents can be so rough on you. My mom used to say, "Oh crap, she's awake." The devil said, "Tell her to go back to bed." It's just, she's awake. Well,
Looking
listen.
back, I was a bit of a challenge, and
Yeah.
in my daily prayers, I asked Jesus. I say, "Look, if you see Mom and Dad today, tell them again I'm sorry. I'm really sorry."
I think we all do that. Once we hit about 25, we're going, "Oh, geez. Well, I better start making a list because we need to do some heavy duty and consistent apologizing, I think." So anyway, I know you have got some questions, I think you said in the virtual green room. What are people asking us?
Well, what they're asking is, and some of these aren't specific questions, but while talking to them, I made notes for us and put them aside. I guess someone heard me tell the story, and a lot of the stories I tell, let me apologize in advance, I'm repeating myself, because once I get a story that really describes something, does a good word picture, I try not to mess with it. But he was saying, how did you get into paid speaking? And the answer is accidentally. I didn't know there was such a thing as paid speaking. And one day in Atlanta, I was doing sales training just because I was doing well. And the head of the Southeast said, Ben, would you tell them what you did this week and how you did it and so on? So I got up and I worked for, I don't know, 6 or 7 hours all day virtually. And then Zig got up, and Zig Ziglar, who had joined the business the same day I had, but he was 18 years older and had had some sales experience and speaking experience. So he got up and he did his biscuits, fleas, and pump handles. Zig would have made a good stand-up nightclub act if he hadn't gone into selling. He did all that. And then as the meeting was breaking up, I looked in the back of the room and I saw Zig approach our sponsor. He's the guy that brought us both into the business, and say something to him. And Bill Dempsey, the sponsor, reached into his suit pocket, pulled out an envelope and handed it to Zig. And I'm thinking, why? The checks came from the company in the mail, and just looked a little out of place to me, but I didn't really worry about it. And then I'm leaving the building, as going, there was this hallway that went from the meeting room past a coffee shop. And I said to Zig, I was walking behind him, I said, Zig, we didn't get a chance to visit. Let me buy you a cup of coffee. And he said, oh, good, that'd be great. So we went in, and after we sat down, I said, Zig, just to keep Dempsey honest, what did he pay you? I'm guessing. Again, I didn't know people paid people to give speeches. He said, well, let's see. And he opened up the envelope and he said, $300. And this is in 1965, so that's like $3,000 today. And he said, what did he give you? And I said, well, I'm getting it later, or the same thing, or something like that. And but the important thing was, to the gentleman who asked the question, that was my last free speech. Except in churches, and I worked in and around prisons for 11 years and a little over 11 years. That was donated. I like to, we figured it up one time. I think I've given over 5,000 paid speeches since that day, and probably another 5,000 free ones, because I did San Quentin once a week for 5 years. So they sort of racked themselves up. But that was my last free speech, unless you had a really good story. Because speaking, which I encourage all of you to develop, join Toastmasters, go to Dale Carnegie if they still teach public speaking, I'm sure they do. Go somewhere and develop the ability to communicate effectively on your feet from the front of the room. In selling, that's where a great deal of the money is, not doing what people think is going on. And then we got a note about scripting, and someone said, could you tell the Judy Garland story? And I also got an email, coincidentally, this week when the guy said, years ago in Charlotte, North Carolina, at an insurance meeting, he didn't say what company, he said, you told the story about scripting and Judy Garland and somebody whose name I can't remember. Well, that was Mel Torme, also a singer. And the story Mel told in a book he wrote about working with Judy Garland was how they had approached him and asked him to perhaps consider being Judy's manager. She'd had some ups and downs and alcohol problems and so on, and they felt they needed to get her on a little tighter leash with perhaps another professional who understood the business. So Mel said, sure, but I want to see her perform. I haven't seen her in years. Let's see where we are. So they left a ticket at the door, and in he came, and he sat down, and Judy got up and did her usual standard show. And then she said near the end, and I'm paraphrasing, but the gist of it was, near the end, "You've been such a wonderful audience tonight, and I've sung it so many times over the years, I don't like to sing it anymore. But just for you," and the orchestra struck up "Somewhere Over the Rainbow," and she sang "Somewhere Over the Rainbow," and Mel said it was just stunning how good she was. And near the end, I don't know the phraseology of the tune off the top of my head, but near the end, the spotlight narrowed down to just her face. The rest of the stage and her outfit were black. He said that's all you could see, and a tear formed in her left eye and ran down her cheek. And then the lights went out, and when they came back up, she was gone. He said he'd never seen anything like that in show business in his life, and he decided he wanted to be her manager. So he
Oh, I
told
didn't
them,
know that.
mm-hmm,
I know he wrote the Christmas song, Chestnuts
mm-hmm,
Roasting on a Christmas,
yeah,
I think it's Christmas
I,
fire.
I can hear his voice as soon as you said that.
Yeah, yeah. I think he was called the Singing Frog or something. He
The
wasn't
ve-
an
the
attractive man, but
the Velvet Fog.
there you go. But oh my God, he could sing and he could write. So
Yeah,
talented.
he had he was extremely talented, but he had what I call a soft edge. It's like somebody running for president, and you think, God, I wish he looked a little more presidential.
Yeah,
Sinatra had the sharp edge. Mel Torme didn't. They were
right.
probably, from a musician standpoint, almost equally talented.
Hmm.
But anyway, Mel said to himself, "I want to be your manager," but he told the group, "I want to come back and see her tomorrow night. We're all here in New York." And so they went to tell Judy, and she sent word back, "No, no, I don't want him here again until he's my manager." And so Mel politely nodded his head and then bought a ticket to the show. So when she struck up her the when she got to the end of her act the next night, she didn't know he was in the audience. And near the end, she said, I've sung it so many times, I really don't like singing it, but you people have been so wonderful tonight. Just for you." And the orchestra hit the first note of "Somewhere Over the Rainbow," and she sang it, and the spotlight came down just her face. And Mel said, at the same note, on the same syllable, a tear formed in her left eye and ran down her cheek.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah, and he said, I realized right then
He'd been
that,
had.
well, he'd been had, but Judy didn't want him to know how scripted it was.
Oh,
She wanted him to think it was spontaneous. And he laughed about it later, said, how many times would I see if I was managing her and I saw that happen every night, eventually I'd probably catch on that was scripted. But there's an example of, no matter, you're watching somebody perform and it never crosses your mind. That's the 10,000th time they've done that or whatever, because they're so good. People in selling are frequently saying, well, I don't want to sound like I'm scripted. I don't want you to either. I want you to be so good you'd never know that it was scripted. If you listen to my stuff long enough, podcasts, uh, live seminars, whatever, you'll notice a strange similarity of stories. When I tell a story, I finally figured out, hopefully, how to tell it, and I tell it the same way every time. They may come in different order, like Hal Holbrook when he did Mark Twain. He'd memorized 2.5 hours of Mark Twain material, but his show, plus an intermission, was a little over an hour. And he said he never did the same show twice. I've probably never given the same sales presentation, except from the front of the room with a script. But I've probably never given the same presentation twice because the prospect hasn't gone to prospect school, so they're likely to say things out of order or different from the last person or what have you. But I have a track to run on, and when I click on this story, then it's word for word, the way I've been doing it for whatever the story, 5, 10, 45, 50 years, because it worked and I've tested it and I know that it works. So why would I screw with it? The uh, other one that I used to use right up the road from us is Lake Tahoe. And I ran a couple of large sales organizations based in this area. And especially when someone was new with us, but the other group wanted to come anyway, we would go up the hill. I can be in Tahoe in less than an hour by car. And we'd go up the hill to see Sammy Davis Jr. perform. And the reason I did it for them was to teach them scripting, how you can have something look so casual and spontaneous, but have it honed to a fine edge. Sammy Davis Jr. used to say in almost every performance, uh, he would sing and do all his stuff. And then rather quickly, the first 10 or 15 minutes, he said, the hotel management doesn't like it when I do this because they want you out on the floor gambling. But you're such a great group. We're gonna play house. I was never sure what that meant, but he always said it. We're gonna play house, and he'd take off his jacket and throw it over on the floor, and then pretend to go long in his act. At which point, I would always whisper to the new people, "Look at your watch." Because let's say he started at 8 and was supposed to finish at 9, you felt like you were in on a special treat, but he started at 8 and he finished at 9 on the dot. And while seemingly being totally spontaneous.
Right,
So
right.
scripting doesn't mean, people say, well, I can always tell when somebody's using a script. Really? Been to a movie recently? Watch the news while they're reading
Yeah,
off of teleprompters?
yeah.
Nothing in professional show business, professional news, professional broadcasting, nothing is done off script. And when it is occasionally, it usually leads to disaster and becomes one of those playback reels you can see over and over again where something went terribly wrong and so on. One that used to drive me crazy, and I loved all of them, was Carol Burnett, Tim Conway, and uh, it was another gentleman.
The dentist,
Oh,
my
well,
favorite.
the dentist is a great one.
Yeah.
Who's the guy in the chair?
Oh
The
God.
partner of Tim Conway, sort of.
And I
Harvey
know it.
Korman.
Harvey
Harvey Korman.
Korman. Harvey Korman.
Okay. Well, they would do a big thing about we're all cracking up and we're out of control and so on. That was scripted. They're professionals. They didn't
No
break,
way.
yeah, they didn't break up over the dentist any more than they broke up over the dentist in the 5 rehearsals that day and the day before.
Oh,
So,
you just broke my heart. You
yeah,
mean when Tim Conway was talking about the little baby elephants?
yeah, that's a great one, isn't it?
Oh
Yeah.
God, I
Of
don't know
course
how
that
many
was,
times I've heard it.
of
You
course it
mean
was
that?
correct.
Oh, see, now I can't ever watch it again.
No,
It just
no,
ruined my
watch it
day.
again and admire his
Oh, it's
ability to look spontaneous while doing
yeah.
something he'd rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed. Hal Holbrook, when he came out, had a trigger story that he always told. And that was the only thing that was always first, always word for word, and so on. Based on the audience reaction, because he gave that presentation, I'm guessing at least a few thousand times, based on the reaction to his opening test story, he told the second story. The second story came from the 2.5 hours of material he had memorized, word for word, but not necessarily the second story. I do a thing when we go out, if we're doing a live seminar, they introduce me and they read the script. I don't even have them pretend like they're not. That's because I don't want them messing with it and they've just seen it, 20 minutes before. Read this word for word. And then when I come up on stage, uh, because it's a well-written script, they almost always standing ovation out of politeness. I haven't done anything yet. And then as soon as it starts to quiet down, I always say, all right, let's get this Ben Gay thing out of the way. and they crack up
Heard you
because,
say that before.
yeah, they crack up because they thought I didn't know there was a product in their local drugstore with my name on it. But based on that reaction, that determines where I start in my scripted presentation. And again, Hal Holbrook, if they don't react well to this one, it may pop up later to the next one. I don't think they will. It may pop up later in the show, but it won't come right then. They just taught me they're not in the mood for that joke or that story. And then one more quick section, this on sales infiltration. I think I've mentioned to you before when I went in the Coast Guard, my father, who'd been in the Navy, said always carry a clipboard and a rag after you get out of boot camp, or you have the option perhaps to be loose for a minute. Carry a clipboard and a rag and stare into the middle distance as you walk briskly along. He said, no one will mess with you. And I carried that clipboard and that rag for the better part of 6 years. I was in the reserve, so part of it's just 2 weeks in the summer and weekly meetings and so on, or monthly meetings. But I carried that clipboard and rag for 6 years, and I was invisible. They go, sailor or a coastie, and other people would turn around. I didn't, because I know they weren't talking to me. I had a clipboard and a rag, and I was headed somewhere. No one ever said, hey, you. Somebody else answered their demand.
And see,
So
I want to know what the rag was for. The clipboard I get, but
I don't know. Dad just said, Terry, I guess like you're going to clean up something.
I don't
And then
know.
I've told you about Ray Considine, the yellow door. I won't go through that again, but that's sales infiltration on the yellow door. Who is it? Considine. The door would open and he'd be in anywhere he wanted to be. And then I was reminded of one during this conversation with this gentleman about the ladder story. It's been floating around for years, but I've seen it done. In fact, I saw it done once and didn't know I was seeing it. I just thought they were doing something. You want to get into a concert or an event of some kind that you're not invited to, that they're checking credentials, etc. This works especially with men. That's the only way I've seen it done. But two men in roughly matching shirts, blue shirts works best. It sort of looks like you're working. Pick up a ladder long enough to be logical for two people to carry it, front and back. Could be an extension ladder or a tall step ladder. Two people with matching shirts pick up a ladder and they can walk in anywhere. Anywhere. Security people will push other people aside so the people with a ladder can get through. One of my friends who has done that
You
more
just
than,
gave a serial killer a good tip.
yeah, well, he'll have to have an accomplice because
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
it takes a ladder big enough for two to justify. But a friend of mine who's done it numerous times, he said the first try, I said, what do you do? Put a ladder in your car? Yeah, I've seen it done, but I didn't know where the ladder came from. He said, no, in big events, you can always find a ladder. So step one is find the ladder. Make sure your shirts sort of have that industrial look about them. Then they can be dress shirts, but blue, and if possible, or at least matching. And then you walk in, and as quickly as you're past security, you put the ladder down. You don't want to be the guy with the ladder if they catch on. And now you're free to go anywhere in the event. And I'm telling you, I've seen it done. I've heard it done by people I know and trust. I personally have never done it. I have other ways of uh, bypassing security, etc. But when in doubt, and you got to get in, maybe past the doorkeeper in some big company, get a friend to help you carry a ladder, and you're in. It is absolutely amazing. I have other notes, but I'll save those till next week.
Yeah, and another great gatekeeper story you told is about the squirrel. One of my favorite
Oh,
stories.
you want to do that real quick?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite stories.
Yeah. I have a friend who's an investment banker, and he's a billionaire with a B. and been a friend of mine for over 30 years. And so anyway, I'm down doing a little training session for him, and we always laugh. He knows I'm not the most financially sophisticated person on earth, which is another way of saying I don't even know what an investment banker does. But at the end of the conference table, usually with his group, I'm doing 12, 15 people. With his people, I put a 3x5 card and I show it to him, propped up right in front of me. It says investment banking, and I show it to him. And I said, that's so as we go through the day, I'll be sure to use the term investment banking, and you'll think I'm on the inside with you. The truth is, I do that to remind myself who you are, because I'm going to tell you exactly the same thing I teach at Kirby Vacuum or at the timeshare resorts or what have you. Selling is selling. And that's also sales infiltration. They think I've let them behind the magic table, and I'm telling them something that that I don't tell other people. Well, I've used that frequently. So anyway, in that conversation with those people in that day-long seminar, one of the things they were talking about was getting past the gatekeeper. I said, well, there's always a way, and I taught them several techniques. I said, there's always a way to do that. And they said, well, we have a lady here who's so tough guarding your friend. I'm leaving him nameless deliberately, guarding your friend. It's hard for us who work here to get in to see him through her. And so I said, well, we'll work on that. Maybe I'll get him to loosen up the gate a bit. We're outside moments later in the courtyard, standing there, and this squirrel comes down a tree, runs across the patio, hops up on a railing, goes down near the executive offices, and picks up a soda cracker and starts eating it. So I'm not the dumbest person in the world. I figured somebody probably put that soda cracker out there for that squirrel. And I said, that's really interesting. Who does that? And they said, oh, that's her squirrel. That's Buddy the squirrel. And even with me, she was being a little protective of Carter. She didn't know how long we'd been friends and so on, but mostly very gracious. And I said, that's her pet squirrel? I said, well, not pet. It runs around the neighborhood, but it comes here to get its soda cracker several times a day. So when we got home, we live out in the country. I went to one of our several feed stores and I said, do you have gourmet squirrel food? Is there such a thing? Oh, yeah, it's over here. And so I said, I need enough to fill a medium flat rate priority mail box. They gave me what they thought was about right. I bought that. Then I went home and packaged it up, put it in a cellophane bag, packaged it up, and addressed it to Buddy the squirrel at the company name, at the company address in Pasadena, California, and sent it to Buddy first class priority. So I knew it'd be there in a day or two. I tracked it on the computer, and sure enough, it showed up probably 2 days later. And an hour after I knew it had been handed to her, and I knew it would be handed to her because that's how you got in and out of anything important in their company. The phone rings, and it's her. She says, Ben Gay, how are you? And I said, fine. She said, Buddy got his squirrel food, and I am so grateful. I've already given him a cup full, and he absolutely loves it. He may not go home at night anymore. And I said, fantastic. And she said, listen, anytime you need anything here, you call me and it will be done. You know, no one will stand in your way here. And I'm quoting from memory, Denise, but I think I spent $8 maybe on the squirrel food, if that, less than 10 on the squirrel food, and $7 or whatever it is to ship it to Buddy. And suddenly I'm inside the company. And here's proof of it. One day I went down to do a seminar for him, and I found a note in my briefcase that, you know, here's the invoice. Well, it should have gone to them before I got there, but because he was a friend, I got loosey-goosey. Normally I won't get on a plane or in the car without knowing I've been paid in advance 30 days before I appear. So I said to this lovely lady, as I was coming out during a break, I handed her the invoice, and it was for a substantial amount of money considering the time involved. And I said, it should have been mailed to you or emailed to you or something. I'm really sorry, but when you get a chance. And she looked at it and she says, whoa, don't go anywhere. It's the first time I ever heard the term. Easy peasy. Tap, tap, tap on the computer. Zzz, out came a check, and she handed it to me for the amount. And she said something to the effect of, that's from Buddy and me. My box of gourmet squirrel food was still paying off and still pays off to this day. I'm greeted like family when I phone there, call there, or visit there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all due to a box of gourmet squirrel food. That's
And
sales infiltration. That's
yeah,
getting
yeah.
past and the gatekeeper has a soft spot. Every gatekeeper has a soft spot somewhere. You just need to find it.
And you, if I remember correctly, that wasn't the only box that you sent Buddy. You replenished that.
Oh no, I've sent Buddy stuff over the years.
Right.
That first time was probably 15 years ago, I'm guessing. But yeah, no, I haven't. It's not like call me when he's low, but from time to time I see little things, and every 6 months or so I send another box of squirrel food. But we don't talk about it anymore, which is another good sign. I'm family.
Right. Right.
It's
And I'm
just,
sure Buddy is long gone and he's got a stand-in
oh
or
yeah,
a
Buddy is long gone,
replacement.
but
Yeah.
Buddy Junior or Buddy the Fourth is still showing up.
There you go. It's a it's a family welfare thing. That's a southern squirrel, I'm telling you. But
So that's that on that. And where they can get the closers, you were nice enough to commercialize it moments ago, is
yeah.
go to stores, stores dot ebay.com /Ronzoni Books, all one word, RONZONEBOOKS, Ronzoni Books. And they will go out, if you order by two any business day, they'll go out to you that day. You get special pricing and free shipping at that address or at that email. And, excuse me, they're still signed and dated by moi.
It seemed like you just kind of went away there for a second.
Yeah, so did you.
Yeah, I heard a beep
It's your
beep and
fault.
I heard a weird beep beep and I think I said a bad word like, oh crap. But hopefully who knows, but we're back. So let's go and tell people very quickly because we do get questions. We do, people, we do want people to connect with us and ask us questions. So give them your email address if you would.
Yeah, to reach me, Denise will give you hers, but to reach me with a question or a comment or something you want covered on the thing, just drop me an email. It's B as in Ben, F as in Frank, G as in gay, the number three, the numeral three, BFG3 at DirectCon. It's short for Direct Connect, DirectCon.net. BFG3 at directcon.net. And if it's something that requires an answer, I'll answer right there. If not, I'll make a note and we'll be talking about it the next time we meet here. Tell them how to reach you.
Oh, I'm easy to find. My email address is info@yourofficeontheweb.com. That's my digital agency. My telephone number is toll free 888-719-6711. Again, that is toll free 888-719-6711. And I know we were going to talk about, we're at the very tail end of Ross Perot, and I really admire him. I always did. I didn't know much about him in the very beginning, but I love to know history. I'm fascinated with history. And the more I would dig into him some years ago, the more fascinated I was with him just as a human being. And one of the things, I mean, we're going to start, I think, on 100, our hometown expense accounts. And you might have to flesh this out for me. He said, I haven't sold anybody over lunch in my whole life. There's nothing worse than driving a point home when a guy's fiddling with his salad. And I tend to agree with that. Let me eat. Don't try to sell me something.
In the lunch or dinner environment, I don't think even he means that, but because that, socializing and so on, and he had an intent side talking about specifics, the features and benefits of the programs he was selling, but he also made people like him, and that had to come from a little socializing here and there. I remember it's not over lunch and fiddling with your salad. The very first lunch I ever had with Dr. Napoleon Hill, he said to me, from time to time, you'd catch him dipping into old phrases he was famous for and just throwing them into conversation like he just thought of them. And in our first lunch, he said to me, never forget, whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve. And as he finished it, his salad with Caesar salad on it approached his lips. And I said, unless he's crazy. And he froze in mid-salad bite. I guess when Napoleon Hill said something, you were supposed to just write it down and change your life. And to me, he was like a grandfather. I had great respect for him, learned a lot from him, but sometimes he said things that were a little odd. And or
Even though
he
he was right, but still.
generally right, in the concept. Whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe it can achieve is a wonderful idea, and I get the point. But if you're talking to a crazy person in an insane asylum who believes he's Napoleon, you got to adjust that just a little bit. If somebody new to selling says they're going to be a millionaire by Saturday, if they unless they win the lottery, they're not. It's not going
Where
to happen.
I
So
remember saying that to my mother when I was young, and she said, I think she patted me on the head.
yeah,
Like, oh, you're so cute.
well, Dr. Hill had I never can pronounce the word apocryphal. Is that right? Apocryphal, as in he didn't say it, but it's something he would have said, or sounds like something he would have said. And there's a lot of that attributed to various people where they never said. I read something from Dr. Hill this morning on the
I thought
internet.
it sounded more like Ernest Holmes, to be honest.
The thing on the internet this morning quoted Dr. Hill. Well, it was apocryphal because the words in the quote didn't exist before he died in 67, he said 69 or 70. The words didn't exist, and I knew him well enough to know he wouldn't have said that. I read another quote from the Napoleon Hill Foundation or whoever puts those things out. He said, if a man doesn't do this or that, he's a loser. That would have never come out of Dr. Hill's mouth or off his pen. He
No, I
didn't,
listened to him enough to know better than that.
yeah. So those are apocryphal comments. And Ross Perot has a lot of those things attributed to him. One of the ones on that last page in that section, an activist is the guy who cleans up the river, not the guy who concludes that it's dirty. And I thought of that not too
And
long
that,
ago. We
yeah,
have
because we've got activists every stinking where you turn.
yep,
I don't know how they don't wear themselves out. They wore me out a long time
or
ago.
make a living.
Well, yeah, they're making a living.
It must
Clearly,
be
they are.
inherited money or something. But
Yeah,
I thought
Soros money, but yeah, sure.
I,
We'll go with that.
I thought of Ross Perot and that statement not too long ago. I've been whining and complaining to the post office, our local post office, and our carrier that are the cluster box. You have, that thing on the corner with 20 boxes in it that feed half a neighborhood or whatever, was leaking somewhere and making our mail in the rainy season damp. I complained to the carrier, that didn't work. I complained to the postmistress, that didn't work, and her successor, none of those worked. I called the regional office it almost became a mild obsession, called the regional office. And then I was given the number in Washington, D.C. And I'm thinking, if I can't get the carrier who's here 6 days a week to do something about it, what's the national office in Washington, D.C. going to do? And then, like a God whisper, I'm watching television, and on comes the guy who puts the caulking stuff and seals a leaking aquarium and puts it on things, and it goes from a spray to a rubber.
Right. Go to Amazon. That's all you have to do.
Yeah. And I thought, God, I guess I could do that. And so for $7.95, after 3 or 4 years of fiddling around with it, if I were serious, I would have gotten it done. But I fiddled with it for 3 or 4 years, almost to Washington, D.C., with no results. Saw that commercial, bought the can. I think it was $7.95. Went down, wiped off the top of the cluster box, sprayed it on. End of story. And I've still got $7.50 worth of stuff in the can in the shipping department. That's where he's talking about. It's the guy who cleans the river, not the guy who concludes it's dirty. For years, I concluded the mailbox leaked. It took me 10 minutes, if
To
that,
fix it. Right.
to fix it.
So you're an
And
activist now. I didn't know this about you.
yeah, well, now I am. When it
Well,
comes to certain specialty items like leaking mailboxes.
right. See, this is the difference between you and me. I would have accidentally run over the whole thing and it would have had to have been replaced.
Well, that's a good point. I was just trying to get my mail not to be damp. So
Well, it's probably
there,
time to replace it anyway. So
yeah,
who knows? But yeah, you just never know. And one of the jumping ahead of you on family, this was important. If I could do one thing, I would try to construct a strong family unit for every family on the basis of love, understanding, and encouragement. Now, he had to have known that that was impossible, but it's a lovely sentiment.
another example where his teachings and Dr. Napoleon Hill's came together. I may have told you one day, I guess he arrived in town just about the time I got back from a 10-day trip and early morning meetings and this and that. And Dr. Hill stayed at the house whenever he was in town overnight or the weekend or the week. And so he was aware of my schedule at home and in the office. And he said to me one day, how do you work out a balance between, I'm paraphrasing, but between family and business? I said, well, as you know, I'm busy. But as to family, I fit that in the nooks and crannies, so I get it all done. He said, well, we've found the problem. And Dr. Hill did not have a happy family life. He was divorced and or annulled 3 or 4 times, didn't have a good relationship with kids or other family members and so on. So he sort of envied the fact that my wife and I, she's now gone, Marcia was her name, got along at all. But he said, it's a miracle you're still married the way you're operating. So get out your calendar. And we went back to the daily success system he taught me. And we started blocking out time for family first. And he said, now I know you're going to spend more time in business than with family, but we're talking about quality time. And we're now going to start fitting business into the nooks and crannies, not your family. And when I read, I would try to construct a strong family unit, as Ross Perot wrote. That's like Dr. Hill. I don't know if he ever wrote that anywhere, but that's the gist of what he regretted, that he never did that. And then on ideas, the last thing in that thing, Ideas are precious and fragile things, and it's terribly important that we encourage them. And that you can encourage yourself with fresh ideas by having a place to write it down. The mind rewards things that it gets pleasure from. And if you write something down and then take action on it, subconsciously, I have friends who human behavioral scientists say subconsciously the mind likes that and goes, oh, you want good ideas? Here's another one. And it'll begin to sprout things for you. But just as importantly, what Perot was talking about here is people that work with you. Make sure that you have an open, welcome atmosphere for new ideas, that no one is saying, oh, we've always done it this way, when in fact, maybe you've always been doing it wrong. And that's not the way we do it here, and so on. I think you and I have talked about this recently. I've talked to somebody about it. The most valuable times I've found with employees, I like to call them team members, but with team members, employees, is when they first come to the company before they get poisoned by, we've always done it this way. And they're still looking at it with a fresh eye. And they're thinking, why did they do it that way? I've had 2 or 3 in the last couple of months that were really significant. We've been doing it wrong or inefficiently for 30 plus years. And a new guy walks in and says, do you mind if I offer a suggestion? I've been watching and told us a new way to pack things. It saved us money, saved us time, etc. And everybody's looking around like, I've worked here for 20 years. I never thought of that. And the other great time is at their exit interview, and always have an exit interview. Make sure their departure is pleasant and upbeat and constructive, unless they got fired for stealing or something. But even then, I think I'd have an exit interview and say, what made you feel free to steal from us? What did we do that made you think that was okay? But mainly what I want to know as they're leaving is, what could we have done better? How could we have kept you? Did we do something that drove you away? What, now that you're leaving and there's no threat of any repercussions, negative repercussions, what could we be doing better than we are now? And you get a whole lot of truth there that you don't get as you just go bobbling through the normal day and relationship. And I believe that wraps us up on Ross's chapter, although we'll come back to it in casual conversation all the time. Just remember that squirrely as he seems sometimes, I'm a big Ross Perot fan, but squirrely as he seems sometimes, people have occasionally used the word crazy. He was terribly effective at what he did. He was a great salesperson. And you gave me the days the last time we were talking about that, when he did his yearly quota in what?
19 days.
In 19 days.
Right. Right.
Which is what drove him away, which caused him to start his own company and go on the board of directors of numerous other companies, because he wasn't willing to sit around for the other 300 and whatever that is, 350 some odd days doing nothing. And he wasn't willing to go out and bust his hump and not make any more money, because they cut off his quota and his income 19 days deep into the year. So perhaps someone should have done what I just said about the exit interview and cured the problem.
Well, and you have to wonder, I mean, these days we have an awful lot of CEOs who are making just horrendous decisions. Horrendous. DEI, woke, whatever you want to call them. And they're tanking companies. Harley Davidson is taking a big whomping right now. You know, that a lot of them, and you have to wonder what in the hell is in their brains that they think these decisions, like the one that was made with Ross Perot, did they even try to extrapolate out what could possibly happen? No, clearly they didn't.
Absolutely. The Harley Davidson thing was on the news again this morning. They're in Sturgis at the big bike ride-in, or at least they were over the last few days.
Yeah,
And
they've
they
been
said
taking a whomping over there.
the Harley Davidson section, they said it's like a ghost town. Even people with Harleys are parking them somewhere else. They are mad. And I thought this may be a time. I'll
They're
do it right.
taping over the logos. They're saying, I don't even
Yeah.
want people. Look, if you've ever heard a Harley, you know it's coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no
And
disguising that
but
sound. But
it's making a statement anyway.
yeah, it is. It
One
is.
one of my best buddies, he attended classes that I taught at Lompoc at the federal penitentiary there. John Buchholz was Sonny Barger's best friend. John was the head of the San Diego club, and Sonny Barger's was head of the Hells Angels. And he told John something that John wasn't supposed to tell anybody until he was dead. And that's when John told me Sonny Barger believed that the Honda Goldwing was a far superior bike than any Harley Davidson ever made. And so I can't picture Sonny on a Honda Goldwing. And John
No.
said he knew you couldn't. So you never saw him on one, but it was a far better bike. And I'm thinking this morning when I was seeing that story, it's time to tell everybody what Sonny really thought.
Not that, but I have to tell you my Harley story, which is, I live in a very small town. It used to be a village. Now it's all grown up. It's a little city now. Mostly because we lived on plantation land. They started knocking everything down and building houses, which really ticked me off, but it is what it is. And I had a neighbor, his brother still lives in the house, but these brothers were roommates for the longest kind of time. And I would hear that Harley fire up. I was like, oh God, because it's right out in front of my window. And I was like, oh, he's walking the dog. They had this giant brown lab, chocolate lab, who was way overweight, and he wouldn't walk on a leash or harness. So the brother would get his Harley, he'd go down the street, and the dog would follow him. And I would just be turn it off because I hate the sound of Harleys. But after a while, it got entertaining, and I'd walk out and watch them. Just I needed the entertainment, I guess. But when I heard that thing, it's like, oh, there goes the dog. I don't think that's the best and highest use of a Harley Davidson, is my point.
We're standing in a exercise yard. I don't know what they call it, but an exercise yard or something at Lompoc, and I'm talking to a group of Hell's Angels because of John, and because they were in a public speaking class and self-development class I was teaching there. And while we're talking, out on the road, on the highway that went beside the prison, was some bikes went by, and they all stopped talking and turned like they were having a religious experience. It was a group of Harley Davidsons going by
Right.
with that sound you're talking about.
Oh, it's distinct.
Yeah.
If you've ever heard it, you'll never forget it.
Well, it's patented. They patented the
Not no.
sound. If you create a new motorcycle line and deliberately create that sound, you'll get shut down. It's a patented
I
sound.
thought it was just one of those can you turn it off sounds for me.
Well,
Stop it.
anyway, and my ability to relate to people is sometimes flawed. I took that moment to say to them, uh, I have a bike. And they turned, suddenly even more respect for Mr. Gay. Really? What do you have? And I said, I have a Honda 550. And they turned and walked away from me like they just discovered. I mean, they went in 360 degrees of directions, like I just announced I had leprosy. And so
Or
we're just,
you're wearing pink underwear.
yeah, yeah. So just John Buchholz and I are standing there. And he turned to me and he said, because he was a serious guy, he spent 14 years in the hole. And by the time I met him, because I was teaching at the medium security and at the low security camp, he was going through decompression. 14 years in the hole, you don't do your time and they just throw you out in the street. They think maybe they'll to wind you down a little bit. So we're standing there and they all walked away, and he turned to me and I can't tell you exactly what he said on a podcast, but the gist of it was if you mention that blinking Honda 550 again, I will kill you. I said, oh, is
Do
it
you
that
think he
bad?
meant it?
Yeah, and he said, it's not a gold wing. Just don't mention
Oh,
Honda and motorcycle again in the same phrase.
oh my
And
gosh.
and at that point, Sonny was still alive. He wouldn't have wanted me to mention gold wing either.
Right,
But a
right.
Honda 550, I discovered you don't bring up in conversation with a dozen Hells Angels.
No. And anytime I think Goldwing, which I don't often because I'm not a motorcycle fan at all. I mean, I stay away when I see them on the road. I'm like, I'm giving them wide berth because you can hurt them. I mean, you have to be careful. So, but anytime I think of Goldwing, I think of, two elderly men, a wife with their dog and saddlebags, and it's like a
Matching
little,
helmets.
exactly. Isn't that what a Goldwing is all about? I can just see a Hell's Angel going, no. I was saying, no,
That's
do not
one
talk
step up
about
from
this.
that tricycle thing,
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
which I'll have to admit I'm sort of fascinated by as I age. But Gigi, because I told her one day, it's got that second seat, and maybe just a little tooling around town for fun. It'd be easy to park, and did a little cheerful sales infiltration type presentation. And she said, over your dead body. Notice she
No,
didn't say over my dead body.
I caught that. Now, did you offer her a golf cart? Because you can decorate those. We have them around here. Golf carts are, I don't know why, but, we'll see little families running up and down the road, especially around Christmas. They get those golf carts out there and they're just having a good old time. Like the golf course, we do have a golf course, several of them, I think, but we
I
don't have
would,
one right here in this neighborhood. So why are you doing this?
if I could have a golf cart downtown, Placerville, small town, that would be great. But you got to get it there, which involves two Highway 49 and Highway 50
Oh no.
with
No.
75 and 80-mile-an-hour traffic. And, there I am in my golf cart with a red flag sticking out. I don't think so.
Mm-mm, mm-mm. Well, you could run around your little neighborhood with it. My neighbors do.
Yeah, I don't go around my neighborhood anyway for fear
Me
I
either.
will I will encounter a neighbor.
I ran into a neighbor the other morning. It was cool enough. It's almost like autumn weather here, which I'm very grateful for. I don't know how long it'll last, but I got the dog awake and I said, let's go. We can breathe. Let's go. Ran into a neighbor I'd never met because that's deliberate. I never meet them. And it's like 5:30 in the morning. This woman is talking out loud on her phone, head down. I could have, the dog wouldn't bite her, but I could have. She wouldn't have seen me coming. It's like,
Yeah.
lady, put your headphones on. It's 5:30 in the morning. What the hell is wrong with you?
And who did you find to call at
At
5:30 in the morning?
5:30 and she was so loud. I'm thinking, "Oh, you're obnoxious." So I switched sides of the street. I could still hear her. And my dog's like, "What?" And I like that side.
You're
But
the one who woke me up.
I know, but it was cool. You got to get out there when you can. I live in the devil's armpit. When it's cool enough to breathe, you go out there. So we are actually running out of time and we're not going to be able to get to page 53 when you're
53.
hit by a two before. So we'll pick that up next week.
All
So
right.
while we're gossiping, any more good stuff?
Good stuff. A cute thing in my notes that I was going to save for next week. Oh, I just found the mailbox story again. So I'll put that aside. I won't put you through it next week. Uh, the Somebody asked me again during the week, tell us how you originally got the closers into bookstores. And I don't think I've shared that here, but I call it reverse shoplifting.
See, I haven't heard this story at all.
All right, well, here's how I did it.
Okay.
We first of all, when I got the rights to the closers part, what we now call part one, and rewrote it, I was looking for a publisher. I didn't know anything about the publishing business, so I thought you're just supposed to get a publisher. Fortunately, I didn't do it, but my staff approached 40 or 50 publishers and they all turned us down. I say fortunately, because that forced us into self-publishing. Self-publishing is where you buy a book at the printing cost and sell it at retail and keep the difference instead of the publisher doing that and giving you a little bit off the top. So thank God they turned us down. But at the time, I didn't know that. So now we've self-published, which means, among other things, we're not in the big bookstore chains. So I had to figure out a way to do that. And I found out about distributors and we were tiptoeing in. And then I was standing in a store one day. I don't think it was a bookstore, I think it was a grocery store. And they couldn't, whatever they were scanning to sell to somebody wouldn't scan. The barcode wouldn't be accepted. So the lady at the counter said, well, I'll enter it manually and that'll put it in the system. So the buying office will start ordering it for us because now we're out. This is the last one and it's not in the computer system. So I said, if you enter it, it goes in the system and they'll start reordering it. And it wasn't even my order. And I think we were talking about a can of peas or something. She said, oh, yeah, it's in the system now and we'll never run out again. I said, really? So I got a
You
few
twirling
copies.
your little mustache. Yeah, really?
I got, I don't know what it was in the beginning, 4 or 5 copies of the book with a couple of Target stores in mind. I don't mean Target, I mean uh, Barnes and Noble or whatever, bookstores. And I went down and I said, where's the business section, the sales section? They pointed me in the right direction. And I put the closers on the shelf, a couple of copies, and just left. And so I had reverse shoplifted. And a couple of weeks later, from that chain's national office, we got an order. I'm making up numbers, but I think it was 100. We got an order for 100
Oh,
because it was in the system and they were out in every store. Can you imagine that? Out in every store.
that's just, that's a miracle.
It is a miracle. And for years, we have been in several of the major outlets. I don't pursue them anymore. We do just fine with referral sales in our website and that eBay site that I just gave out. It's not worth the trouble because bookstores like to order things, then they have 90 days to return it. And then what they do is if they order 50 and they only needed 30, they return the 20 they still have, or if I got the math backwards. And as soon as you get the 20 back in a box, somewhat beat up always, they order another 20. So who gets rich in the bookstore business, unless you have the current big, bestseller, is
Right, right.
UPS and the Postal Service, driving new books out, bringing old books back, driving new books back out, and so on. So it doesn't hold the fascination it used to with me. And with bookstores, we have a no return policy. I've told the buyers, I don't want to play that game. Buy what you need and it's yours. So, but we got our toe in the door. It was like Buddy the Squirrel. Buddy the Squirrel in this case was books just put up on the shelf, counting on their system to put it in. So that's reverse shoplifting. And for us, it was very effective. And if you're selling something out there, you have a product or service you can't get into XYZ, grocery store, bookstore, what have you, give it a try.
And this is part and parcel of why you're so successful at what you do because you're out there, you're always looking, you're always cataloging, you're always paying attention, you're making notes.
Yep.
Goes back to what you said in the very beginning, write it down.
When you're not the smartest guy in the room, you got to take notes and observe because other people are already doing what you'd like to have done. You just got to find it. As Earl Nightingale used to tell me, he said, Ben, everything you need to know, every problem you've ever had has been solved, written down, put in a book, and it's in a library somewhere. You just got to find it.
It's absolutely true. Well, I can't believe this. We are completely out of time. So before we wrap up another episode of the Closers Inner Circle podcast, Do you have anything else you want the audience to know, Ben, before we say goodbye?
No, I'm good. I hope your book is coming along. Denise, for those of you listening, is busy writing The Closers Part 4, which is going to be on podcasting and other things she knows, all things computer-wise, internet-wise, and so on, but mainly on podcasting. So keep an eye out for that. We'll,
Yeah.
of course, announce it here
Oh, yeah.
when it's in stock and ready to go, but they're finishing up redoing the website. And Gigi was saying, do we have a picture of The Closers Part 4 yet? I said, she's still writing it. Let's not.
I'm close. I'm very close. In
Yeah.
fact, I'm writing, I think I told you this. The sales infiltration is the biggest chapter, longest chapter in the closers part 2. And I am working on my big chapter right now because, they're like you, I'm doing short, pertinent, pithy chapters.
Mm-hmm.
Not pissy, pithy, Pithy. But my sales infiltration chapter is phenomenal. If I can, I have to say it. I'm so proud of it. And I'm going to tell you right now what it's called. So you're doing it wrong.
Give it to me again.
You're doing it wrong. You're making it, or I'm probably going to change that, but you're making it too hard on yourself.
Yeah.
Something along those lines. You're not doing
Yeah.
it wrong, but you're just making it too darn hard.
I
Stop
think it's a great
overthinking
title. Don't
and
change
just
it.
do it. Okay.
Put an
Okay.
exclamation mark after it.
Yeah.
You're
You're not
doing it
making it
wrong,
too
exclamation.
hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll do that. But anyway, so that's coming to you really soon. But okay, everybody, as we wrap up another episode, as I just said, of the Closers Inner Circle podcast, we want to extend our heartfelt thanks to each and every one of you for tuning in and for, telling people, hey, go listen. These guys are fun. We hear that a lot, by the way. Your support and your engagement are what keeps this podcast thriving. And we hope you found today's discussion insightful and inspiring and funny. And we will see you next week. Ben, what are we going to talk? Well, we're going to go back to the page 50, whatever it was. I can't
Yeah.
remember now.
Yeah.
So we're good to go. And I will see you next week. And again, happy birthday.
Thank you.